We're outside the wall. I'm Raim, yeah, Honduran or Mexican, as my friends say. We have Abel Exdeath and our Canadian and Wally as our American United States. Tonight,
Hello.
Hello.
today we'll be talking about The Lost Boys, which is a film we watched last week. This one is a film that we're doing on a fortnight of vampire and werewolves movies. This one was directed by Joel Schumacher, and we're going to begin with Wally's opinion of it.
Okay, I guess I'll get the worst of it out of the way then. Um, to be fair, I didn't hate this film. I just found it to be very underwhelming. This is a type of film that had you asked me 15 years ago to watch, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But for me at this point in my life, it's not really something that I would go out of my way to watch or really care about. At the end of the day, it's a vampire movie that's told with kind of a modern twist. It takes away that kind of, it's not your typical Hammerstein film about a group of coming of age kids who are kind of this like semi rebellious, semi nerdy nature who move into this town. I think it's supposed to be some kind of town in California. I don't know if it's whether it was fictionalized or not. But basically, them trying to fit in, and then the older brother of one of the main characters gets kind of sucked into this gang, and it later turns out to be that they are all these vampires, and the whole plot revolves around trying to eliminate them and trying to um, protect like his the older brother, and then the love interest of the older brother. It's very campy. That's I think goes without saying. Yeah, I just this film for me didn't really leave a good impression for me. I basically that's the my summary of it, and we can talk about it in greater detail.
Okay, so you want to just go on?
Well, I mean, you guys can summarize your bits if you want to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start then. So I never saw this movie growing up, unlike who I believe did. But my mom sometimes played the song "Cry Little Sister," which is sort of like the theme song to this. Back on Bear Share, which was like a crappy torrenting app back in the day. And to me, this just knowing this song and knowing that it came from a vampire movie, but nothing else about the movie, made it actually seem like very dark and frightening sort of film. Like I kind of imagined the older brother, like narrator of the song, coaxing his sister towards him to devour her and drain her blood. And that made me pretty scared of it. I think I would have been too afraid to actually watch the movie as offered me as a kid. So coming from that experience, it was pretty funny to go visit it as an adult, and it was actually more of a comedy movie than a horror movie. So for example, just put it into sort of perspective, none of the named characters die or even get injured in this. There's not really any gore to speak of. Mostly just like teen drama sort of comedy, but more comedy, filtered vaguely through vampire lore, which I thought was kind of funny. Like some of the jokes landed. Um, I keep talking about this. I appreciated how the main character, sort of Michael, gets peer pressured into becoming a vampire, which is something I had never seen before. And like one of the main antagonists, it has this power to manipulate people's perceptions. The only thing we ever see him use it for is to prank Michael into thinking he's eating maggots instead of rice. Really dumb. And then later on, when they're gearing up to fight the vampires, they put holy water in squirts to shoot them. I thought that was funny. And there's like right at the end, there's Grandpa has this really cheesy one-liner where he like kills the last vampire. And he's like, "That's the one thing I always hated about this town. All the goddamn vampires." That line actually made me laugh. It was the easiest things you can ever imagine. But there's this at the end where a guy named Max, who seems to be sort of a hapless bystander, turns out to actually be the head vampire. I thought that was pretty well handled for the most part because it has some elements that are designed to sort of take you off the trail. Notably, one scene where they try to prove he's a vampire and seem to prove the opposite. There are also elements like scenes that once you know the twist, get recontextualized and look like foreshadowing. the one part where he has to be invited into the house, of course, and right at the beginning, he tells the vampire gang that he told them not to come back. Those are both examples. Now, on the other hand, that twist isn't very impactful. All it really serves to do is extend the climax by a couple minutes. And much more negative than that is that the romance in this movie is really poor, very rushed. Force clearly happens only because of the script. They have like two scenes in the film. Um, Another thing I know is I never really liked any of the two lead characters, the two brothers. The start of this movie kind of plays out like it was directed by a geriatric and designed to show how ungrateful, rude the youth of today are. Just them being complete obnoxious brats to their mom for the whole like 10 minutes, and my opinion of them never really recovered. So, and the last thing that I would cite is kind of like Wally. I just never didn't have much of a strong impression. There weren't really any special moments that really, I think will stick in my memory, aside from a few laughs. Just kind of seems like a fairly average film on the whole. I guess that's where I'll leave it, and I'll turn it over to you, Rain.
So I seen this movie before when I was a teenager, and I really liked it then. And seeing it back again, I still enjoy it a lot. I think it's, as mentioned, it's a very interesting take and amusing one of teenage vampires without it being too melodramatic. Actually, I really appreciate that there's a bit more like ants and rebelliousness to the kids, but they aren't really having like these kind of problems that will have like kids in school and very melodramatic about romance. Even though the romance is really the weakest part of the character interactions, it's still not as bothersome as it could have been, I feel. I do like a lot the styling, how the soundtrack plays with the most of the moments, as it will text had mentioned. The Cry Little Sister theme is one I always like how it's played throughout several scenes. And there are also a lot of other tracks like Lost in the Shadows when they're riding on the motorcycles. I think they really enhance the style of the film, all the takes and the shots. I I I also like the Max plotline as mentioned. There's a lot of elements that they mention about the vampires, like never inviting a vampire inside your home, and of course, like they did that beforehand. And his take about how he seems to be really that kind of really gentle older guy that's trying to hit on these kids matters. It's really interesting how it's and nice how they played out in the end. I i do like how they do play up the campiness as mentioned. I like Corey Feldman's character. He's always talking on this very gruff voice, like he's it's kind of badass, and it's really amusing. But I think it really fits well the character and how they're these two brothers. They're like the only guys in the entire town that so far seem to know that there are vampires, and they're trying to convince the younger brother that his brother has turned into a vampire, that Michael has turned into a vampire, and this guy always talks like he's like this badass uh, all time veteran vampire hunter. But it fits well with when you think of the fact that they are all kids and they're like playing these personas that they have. And I really like that kind of sense that it's as mentioned, it's not really a gory vampire movie or really a horror. It's more like just like a teenage comedy about vampires, and but still not. It still has a certain touch of like seriousness to it that it doesn't feel too slapstick. Yeah, like even when the Evil Dex mentioned that the kind of type of like squirt guns with holy water, it may seem really silly, but I mean it is silly, but it's not as it could have been. It actually can kind of sees well with how the characters are. And I think it's a lot better than saying that if the kids are actually going out and getting like guns to fight the vampires or something, it's a good tone for it. And yeah, for me, it's a good movie to go back to. It's also, I think, my favorite Joel Schumacher film that I've seen. Uh, I also seen the Batman films of his, but I think that some of them better. The less talk about, the better. And yeah, I think that's my perspective, my summary of
Cool.
it.
Yeah,
We'll move
I
into
remember. Yeah, I remember as soon as I found out that Joel Schumacher was the in the opening credits, I'm like, oh god.
yeah.
And I think that probably didn't help my impression of the film. But
Yeah, when we say it's his best film, then we might be a caveat that the competition isn't particularly stiff on.
no,
So,
so
okay, I
I'm
wanted
actually.
to talk about
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I want to talk about the Brothers Frog because I meant to bring them up, and especially Corey Feldman's performance in my own remarks, but I forgot. I agree that he's definitely the best part of the film. I actually really liked both of those characters, the way they were sort of handled, where they are obviously just kind of LARPers pretending to be vampires, know a damn thing. And I like that they're pretty much essentially completely useless. So they have that consistency with how those two are portrayed as well.
Yeah, so actually, I'm interested what you two guys think. How this particular film possibly have had influenced kind of the modern view of vampires via things like Twilight and some of your more modern books and movies. Because, like I mentioned, from my understanding, this definitely was one of the first that kind of veered away from the typical Bram Stoker or Hammer films. Sorry, I said Hammerstein in the beginning. It's Hammer films. It kind of broke away from some of those tropes where your vampires were all just cape-wearing, Transylvanian accented individuals to more like kind of a very modern twist to it. So I'm curious what you guys think.
Do you want to go forward? You will take, sorry.
No, you had.
So this, I think this, Little Dex and I saw another vampire movie together a long time ago,
Yeah.
which was the Interview with the Vampire. That's also like a slightly different take on vampires, and I feel like compared to this, Lost Boys is is a lot better about it. I do like, as you mentioned, it's not really the standard Bram Stoker, or like you mentioned, Hammer films, Cape vampires, the guys that even if when they do like certain changes to, or like adaptations to the lore, when they mention like they go to the cave to go find the vampires and kill the head vampire in order to save Michael, and they're like this major cave, they say like, oh, this is one giant coffin, and it's really nice how how they do like those touches that they're still vampires, they're still like in a place that's secluded from sunlight, but they don't really sleep in coffins there. They're just like hanging from the walls like they're giant bats. And they also plays a lot of saying like they made they made vampires cool for its age, and I think they're still pretty cool today. They're basically this motorcycle gang of vampires, and it's it's definitely like a lot better than I would say how vampires look in Twilight, or even probably like Vampire Diaries. I think was the CW series. Um, I think they don't go away too much from the lore to say that it's that different of more vampires. I mean, they're still damaged by sunlight. They could still be sick through the heart. They were still held by holy water. But which a lot of more times don't do that. They're just like, oh, they're vampires, but they don't really have these weaknesses. And I'm not much of a fan of that, of making like vampires that kind of powerful. I like that they still have certain limitations to them, despite being overly physically better than humans.
Okay, so I feel like the question's a little bit above my depth because I don't read vampire stuff too much and haven't really researched it, but I do know that this film was quite successful and did have sort of a cultural influence. I think it might have been as much promotion of like the teenage aesthetic clothing shows as vampires. One thing that we can connect both this and Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and even Twilight is that all three of them are an attempt to make vampires sexy, basically.
Yes.
So apparently, production before Joel Schumacher, I think, was added, they were actually going to make this movie more akin to the Goonies with even younger characters, and then like sort of emphasize the child vampire element more. But I think it was Schumacher. It might have been someone else though came on and like try to sort of redirected it, try and make it sexier again, age the characters, and all these sorts of things. So there's also this aspect of the vampire shining in the sunlight. And but he mentions that in dialogue in this film, and of course that's a major thing in Twilight. Where apparently that was how it started. Was the author had that idea of the vampire sparkling in the sunlight and expanded the rest from there. So I don't know if that was the influence or if that's actually an older idea associated with vampires or what. That kind of shows my lack of research on that subject.
Yeah, and so to pick up a point, I think Exdeath you had mentioned, the one thing that really like was cringeworthy for me when watching this was that quote unquote sex scene in this film, particularly with the music playing in the background. I mean, once that music started playing, I'm in my head. I'm going, "Oh God, what is this?" It literally it brought me back memories of watching the movie Watchmen and that really awkward long sex scene with Night Owl and Silk Spectre. With I think it was Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah playing in the background. It's just that same kind of like who in production decided that this was a good idea.
Yeah, so definitely no arguments on that one. I agree. That seems pretty awful, and that the romance is easily the weak point of this film.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely could have been improved a lot. I think they didn't start off too bad. Like when Michael meets Star and he's like, "Oh, your parents too," and like when they were also ex hippies. Like it could have been a good starting point, but they don't really spend any time together to say it. And then
Yeah,
they just like, "Oh yeah, I love you, Michael."
Yeah, it
yeah,
goes from level 1 to level 1,000 in like 10 minutes.
yes, definitely. Big issue with it. To a lesser extent, the little kid that Star, the love interest, has around him is like a bit of an emotionally manipulative element to that, how that character's handled in the story as well. Because they never really characterize him or do anything with him, but you're supposed to want to save him just because he's a little kid, really.
Yeah, that's my other big weakness with this film is, for me at least, there wasn't that much of character development in many of the characters. It was just, I mean, granted, the length of the script and length of the movie is not going to help that, but I just felt like there really wasn't. There was very almost every single character was pretty one dimensional um, in how they were
Yeah.
built.
Okay, so Rain, you're the advocate of this film. Would you like to present a counter argument to that?
Well, I think with the kid, in part, there isn't really much to say. I like a detail at the start when they mentioning that the kids are going missing, and you've seen this kid before, and then there's like this milk jug that say, they has this image on the back side that says missing kid. I I like that detail, like, oh, this is the kid that was missing, and then like, oh, the vampire, so he's probably a vampire too. Then, and
Okay.
about the guys in general, well, I think some of them didn't really that much of development for how they're used, like the Frog Brothers, as you mentioned before. They're really just a really fun part of the film, and I think they do well what they want to be, and they're generally consistent with what they want to do, which is like be these old badass vampire hunters. And they actually, I mean, they get the first vampire kill in the film too. So, and they also try
Do
to,
they? Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah.
yeah, they when they,
On a sleeping vampire, to be fair. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but still, they had to have some arm strength to to push that into the chest.
Yeah. That surprised me a little bit, actually, because I thought that kid would be too much of a sissy to actually go through with it,
Hmm.
even on a sleeping vampire.
Yeah, but they really like play to their strengths in that, and they also have like this moment like on the on the final battle when they're also chasing the kid and trying to kill the kid too, and the girl, and she's like, no, but he's just a little kid, and which is it's true that the kid is like too little to actually do anything at the moment. And that's was the whole point of them at the beginning, that they wanted to, well, not at the beginning, like at the middle of the film, that they wanted to kill the head vampire so they will turn back to humans, as they hadn't killed anyone, and as he was explained. One of my favorite scenes, I think, sequences in it is when Michael is he has like this craving for human blood, and his younger brother Sam, I think, is
Yes.
taking a bath, and I like that sequence where he's just like about to enter in his in and the dog saves him. Uh, I thought that was like a really shot scene. How in all the tension that it gives. But
Okay.
yeah, much of the characters really, yeah, don't have much of development. But I think some of them didn't really need it, uh, like the Frog Brothers, or
Mm.
that like the grandpa really didn't have much except like trying to hit on this widow. I remember, and I think the coolest character easily is David, and
Okay.
he's actually the one that probably has a bit more shown to him, since he seems to actually have some real connection with the other guys. They do have like this sort of like brotherhood gang sense feeling, and they also go back to, well, even when they go back to take vengeance of the kids because they killed the fellow vampire, he's kind of wanting Michael to join them. So like he wants to basically maintain their vampire race. And I like that when they're like a few vampires and they're like, we even if you help this guy, it would still be nice if you kept us because we aren't really that much, and they really add a disadvantage. So yeah, I think those are the. I think David is probably the most salvageable of them and the Frog Brothers.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with that argument. I think you can say that David complexity there. A couple.
Yeah. Well, what helps with that too, I think, is the fact that he's made as kind of the foil for the audience to make them think that he's like the actual head of the gang throughout most of the film, which I think is part of the reason why there's at least a little depth. I'll grant that to David's character.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the Brothers Frog as well. I think they're definitely effective comedy characters, and you can kind of get away with a character being pretty one-dimensional in a comedy if they're funny. So I like those two. They're my favorite part of the film, as I said. So I'll give them a pass as well. I think the main characters are now the sort of weak point that we have to look at, where I don't think they develop very well or interestingly, really. And
Yes, that's my biggest gripe.
yeah, and I the parents to a lesser extent, but their role is a little bit more to the side, so it's not as bad. I like that they seem completely clueless about everything that's going on throughout most of the film. I think that was like appropriate to this the childlike tone that they're trying to go for.
Yeah, well, I think the other ones that don't really have much of a development, but are played well is well, I think we already mentioned this, like had the Max plot subplot basically. Like he seems to be this nice guy, and he's with the brother's mom. I think he's kind of foreshadowed well too, and it also makes sense. So when he says on the end that the boys need a mother too to help them keep them in line. So but he's not really that main of a character to say that I can complain much about him in comparison with the brothers. Like I think it could have been a bit more interesting if Michael had to battle more throughout the film about trying to eat his brother. There's only really like
Yes.
one moment where that happens, and that's what I really like about it then. But then it never like really come back. It's not like craving for blood or something. That I think that was a missed opportunity.
So I wanted to talk more about like Cry Little Sister and the use of that in the movie because I actually disagree with you, Raim. I don't like how it's used in the movie. I like it as a song, but I think it would have been more satisfying if they had a single sequence where it's played fully, as opposed to what they do in the movie, which is cut it up and sprinkle it out throughout the movie at various points.
Yeah, just as long as it wasn't a sex scene.
Yeah. Also, some quite interesting aspect of that is that it was composed without the like songwriter having seen even a single frame of the movie, and I think that kind of shows that like, my childhood reminiscence that there's a bit of a tonal contrast between the song and the film, and I would kind of argue in extension to that that the fact that the composer wasn't shown any footage from the film before it was made kind of shows like a lack of craft on Joel Schumacher's part, he's being a bit lazy.
I think the what you mentioned about the song being sprinkled throughout. I noticed this at least I noticed in certain 80s film where this is used, kind of like a trend. The easiest one I can think of is Top Gun, where they don't only just play
Yeah,
uh, Danger Zone like 3 times, they also play Take My Breath Away several times. And there was like, oh, yeah, no, they have like this playing up the cheesiness and the tension, and like right before like a romantic moment, and then it just starts hearing the organ of Take My Breath Away, and so. And I actually like that in Top Gun. It's plays to his campiness, cheesiness. It's very fun. So I feel a bit of that here in the Lost Boys. When I hear Cry Your Sister being played throughout in certain moments, it's that kind of like setting the tone for it, and I really like the song as a whole. So I really like how this
so
movie.
I think I find myself in a difficult position here because I agree that I like that effect was used in Top Gun, but I'm not sure I like it in Lost Boys. So it's going to be difficult for me to reconcile that. I'll probably have to think more about it. Now, another thing we can bring up is the idea of a reprise in musicals, which is like I would say arguably a superior substitute for this technique of chopping up a song and sprinkling it after a movie. So just this is not the greatest or most well known example, but How to Train Your Dragon, for example, the score has like recurring motifs from different songs that play at other parts of the films, make that sort of connection between the previous scene where the similar song played and the new one, and it does that without sort of sacrificing the variety of the soundtrack.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's I think that will be ideal. But as I mentioned, I think this is kind of like a bit of a trend of the 80s, probably. So
Yeah.
so and I think that's like there's a certain charm to it. It's not meant to be great, but I think it does so like well and nicely in the scenes where it is play. So that's why I mentioned like Top Gun
Yeah.
because that's the top example that I have in my head because they play like 2 or 3 different songs. They also play like a musical version of the end credit song Mighty Winds from Chick
Yes, that's
Flick,
right.
and they also play like just an instrumental when they're in like in the fighting drills. So yeah, that's that's a movie that I think did more than one song several times, but I do like it how it's used. So with the Lost Boys, that's why I also like Cry Little Sister. It gives me that kind of like 80s charm of reusing several parts of a song in different scenes to really give that it's part of the film, of the style.
Okay. Leave that there then, so we don't just argue back and forth all day.
Yeah,
Yeah, unfortunately, I have nothing else to add.
I think
Okay.
we already have like close to 30 minutes now, 29 minutes. So I would probably
Okay.
say
Well, there's one last thing we could briefly talk, which is the use of literary references in this movie. So, mostly, of course, the Lost Band reference. And that's used to connect this idea of vampirism as a way of avoiding, similar to how Peter Pan and the Lost Boys go to an island as a way of never growing up. And then another one that I noticed, probably even some more, is that the Frog Brothers are named Edgar and Allan, so that's a very obvious reference to Edgar Allan Poe, of course.
Right. Yeah, I definitely picked up on the Peter Pan reference, and just that's one thing I will give it the film credit for is that kind of having this not just a vampire take on kind of like never growing up, but just that this modern the vampirism is like this form of escapism for this gang.
Yes, so the Peter Pan reference is not only there, but well applied. We might say this is in contrast to the reference, oh, it's kind of just there for its own sake, I would argue.
Yeah, it's more like an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Evil Dex one mentioned that we could probably be called the Lost Boys too.
Yeah, I didn't mean it as a reference to this film. I was going to make a joke, a meme where it was like when you're trying to reference Peter Pan, your Mexican friend turns it into something about his gay vampire.
That's a good one. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's just about it. We could say.
Yeah, okay. All
Sounds
right.
good.
Thank you.
Outside the wall. Hopefully, you'll tune in next time. We'll discuss the film. Excuse my pronunciation. Le Pacte de Loup.
Or the Brotherhood of the Wolf, as it's called in English.
Yeah.
See you. Thank you.